Yeah, what I'm going to do today is replace the clutch in this 2011 Dodge Ram 3500 truck. It's four-wheel drive with a Cummins diesel. And the first thing I always like to do on any truck that I'm going to replace the clutch in is pull the shifter out before I'm filthy dirty. Yeah, so what you're going to do to get this piece out around the shifter is take these two pieces out. This one back here, and there's some screws inside, and then this console piece should come out. Yeah, so now all these pieces come out. So now this air duct here needs to come out, and then there's a bunch of screws underneath, and then the other rubber boot comes off. And this one, I just pulled it up around the handle. You don't need to take that completely off. So now what you want to do is make sure the shifter's in neutral. It's easier to put it back in if it's in neutral. So then there's some 4 external Torx bolts that need to come out. And there's oil all over this. I think the customer must have had this apart or something. He said it was, when it gets hot, you can't get it in gear, like the clutch pilot bearing's bad. He probably took this apart. And as soon as you take those 4 bolts out, the shifter comes out. And I'm not going to film every single detail of this because I need to get this job done and get it out of here. And it takes too long to do that. Yeah, so now I got the shifter out and it just pulls out of the top of the transmission. So now we're ready to jack the truck up and start taking it apart. Yeah, and on something like this, I use these 12-ton OTC jack stands. They're very stable. Here's the part number. Yeah, and even in the lowest setting, it's like 1.5 feet high. Yeah, and here's what it looks like with these jack stands in the lowest position. I won't even have to raise it up any higher than this. There's plenty of room to do this. So the next step on this would be to take both drive shafts out. And it's just got some Torx screws where it's held to the differential up here. Oh, and it's got one missing bolt here. Yeah, and the rear drive shaft, I'm surprised on this, it's just one piece. Yeah, I got the front drive shaft out, and it's best to take the end off that's attached to the transfer case first. Then you can move this around and get a straighter shot at these Allen screws to get the socket on there. So now I'm ready to get my transmission jack out. Yeah, I don't recommend doing this job without a transmission jack. And a lot of the rental yards, you can even rent them. Yeah, 'cause this transmission is pretty big. And then with the transmission jack, you chain it on there and you can roll the whole thing back with the transfer case and everything and leave it attached. Yeah, so now I have to go get the right clutch kit. The customer bought the wrong one. And I'll explain why later in the video, but the right one comes with the flywheel. Yeah, I just got the right clutch kit. So what needs to happen next is I need to disconnect all the wires and the clutch slave cylinder needs to come off. And I always tie the clutch slave cylinder out of the way when I'm, just to keep it from hanging down on my face when I'm doing that. Yeah, I used a zip tie and tied the clutch slave cylinder up right there. I got all the wires are disconnected. It does go over to the other side of the transmission to an oxygen sensor, which I've disconnected. So now I'm ready to get the transmission jack out, and then I can take the cross member out. Okay, so now I'm going to put the transmission jack in here. And I'm going to try to get it back here as far as I can, closest to the cross member, because you got the transfer case hanging there, so it's balanced right. Okay, this is where I'm going to put the transmission jack in. With the insulation on the floor, I can't get the chains over it until I get the cross member out of there and lower it down some. So that's what I'm going to do. Yeah, so I got the chains on there on the jack. And the best way to get to these bolts that hold it to the engine is with one of these long extensions with a universal on it and a socket. Yeah, so I got the transmission and transfer case out. So now I'm ready to start taking the clutch off. And this is pretty heavy, so you have to be up under your rope to support this pretty good. Yeah, so when you take the flywheel off on one of these, it's very heavy. What you want to do is leave 2 bolts in there loose and pry this out to where it's loose on the crankshaft. Then you can put a floor jack under here and then finish taking the bolts out and lower it down. That way you're not going to take all the bolts out and grab it and pull it off the crankshaft and it'll fall. Yeah, the thing I wanted to show you about the clutch, I'm not going to be able to show you because somebody's replaced this clutch once before, which is odd for a 2011 truck. Normally these flywheels, they call it a dual mass flywheel. It's 2 separate pieces with springs in it. And anytime I get one like that, I replace the flywheel because the new clutch is bigger. It's like 1 inch bigger in diameter. Yeah, and the Ford trucks also use that dual mass flywheel. And all it's supposed to do is make it where it takes off a little bit smoother. It's got springs in the clutch disc and the flywheel, which you don't need. And I'm not sure on those flywheels if they can even surface them. I've never tried to have one done before. Normally I just do the whole kit where it comes with everything. Yeah, I just went and took that clutch back and got the first clutch back. Yeah, I didn't realize this thing, somebody had already replaced the clutch once before. And it's $200 more with the flywheel. That's why I took it back. Yeah, I would never think a 2011 truck's already had a clutch in it. Yeah, so what you want to do is clean this off, this part the throwout bearing slides on. And you also want to put a little bit of grease on that ball that the clutch fork pivots on before you put the throwout bearing on. Yeah, and you also want to make sure you got grease on the inside of the throwout bearing where it slides at. There's a groove where the grease goes in there. Yeah, I pretty much got it all back together. Yeah, and before you put the shifter in, you always want to check the oil. And then you can dump the oil in the shifter hole to fill it up, which I just did. Yeah, I never even noticed that when I took the shifter out. These bolts are all loose. Yeah, it looks like everything works.